Greetings, sentient beings and gracile hominids. Or, to put it another way, good morning, everybody. Now, not last time, the time before, I streamed myself reading the Sky End User License Agreement in Terms of Service, which, rather surprisingly, has turned out to be my most popular YouTube video on my channel, linked in the About section. And I thought what I would do is continue this theme and see how well it does. And so I propose this morning that I am going to read That Game Company's privacy policy, because this is another one of those documents that nobody ever reads, including me, I should hasten to add. I have given it a quick scan before this, but I have by no means read the entire thing. And why am I doing this? Well, there's two reasons. One, it struck me as being an amusing thing to do, and I will endeavor to expand this to other legal or company policies for other games, especially if I get requests. And two, because it puts the information out there in a form that people don't have to sit down and read. They can put this on while they're cleaning the house or something and listen to it. And there is also a third reason. I understand that listening to me read these things is actually a pretty good cure for insomnia. So let us be about it. This privacy policy apparently was last updated, it says 110 days ago. Down here it says it was last updated on April 5th, 2024, and is effective as of April 10th, 2024. It also goes on to say, if you are a resident of California, please be sure to review the California Consumer Rights Disclosure regarding the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, in addition to this privacy policy. And for half a second I thought that said California Consumer Piracy Act, which would not be the same thing at all, would it? So as we can see, there's quite a bit. I may end up having to stream this twice and then upload it as parts 1 and parts 2, because it looks like it could be quite considerable. So we will start with the introduction. If you are here, you have reached us by visiting thatgamecompany.com or any other That Game Company owned website, in brackets the site, or by registering or installing any That Game Company interactive entertainment product, the game or games, or by using any of our other online or offline services, collectively the services. That Game Company is committed to protecting your privacy. This privacy policy explains our collection, use, disclosure, retention, and protection of your personal information, as well as your rights to your data under US and international law, including but not limited to EU Directive 2002/58/EC and the EU General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, the Controlling the Assault of Non-Solicited Pornography and Marketing Act of 2003, CAN-SPAM, and the U.S. Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA. This privacy policy does not apply to any third-party website services or applications, even if they are accessible through our services. We may refer to That Game Company herein as TGC, we, or us. Also, please note that unless we define a term in this privacy policy, all capitalized terms used in this privacy policy have the same meanings as in our terms of service. So please make sure that you have read and understand our terms of service. Where we are required to identify a data controller pursuant to regulation, That Game Company is the designated controller of the data we collect. So, that's the introduction. Well, part of it. I note, by the way, that I have just rendered this non-fit for young people Most of my videos are suitable for young people because of the necessary mention of the assault of non-solicited pornography. So therefore this will be marked on YouTube as not fit for children. This privacy policy describes the information we collect, how we collect such information, and the purposes of our collection, how we use and with whom we share such information, how you can access and update your information, and how we protect the information we store about you. I should mention at this point that if you visit online forums, the one I'm most familiar with is the official Facebook forum, you will see people saying, well, that game company basically can collect and do whatever they want with your information. Hopefully, we will get some clarification on that as we go through it, because I'm almost certain the people actually making such claims have never actually read this document. Oh, I should further add, I don't expect any references to zombie apocalypses, as there are in the end-user license agreement and terms of service. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should go and watch that video, because it's hilarious. Oh, further, I'm informed that other companies actually have zombie apocalypse-related information in their EULAs and terms of service as well, and hopefully I will find some of that as we go on with this series. Information we collect. When you interact with our services, we may collect and store information from you directly as described below. Registration information. If you create an account, you may be asked to provide your name, email address, a password, and other information that helps us confirm that it is you accessing your account. We may do this through in-game dialog boxes, which you may choose to decline. Your account may be used to enable social features of the services, which may include user-to-user interaction, chat or messaging functionality, competitive gameplay and matchmaking, and other similar features. Which is kind of interesting because, as I recall from the EULA and terms of service, matchmaking is not allowed by Sky, the Children of the Light. To be honest, to be absolutely certain of that, I would pretty much have to put up the documents side by side and go through very carefully to confirm. I am relying purely on my memory here. Oh, and here's a good point. Any comments I make are basically my opinions only. They do not reflect anybody else's. I have no legal training. I am not privy to what's going on in the minds of TGC personnel, their legal team, or anybody associated with them. We may also offer you the option to complete a user profile that is visible to other That Game Company users. Your user profile may include a profile photo, a That Game Company username, biographic details that you provide, details about the games you play, and a unique TGC account ID number that is created by That Game Company and used to identify your profile. The information you include in your profile is optional, and we advise you to limit the information you share through this feature if you have concerns about your privacy. I have to say that for Sky Children of the Light, I don't think you have to provide any personal information directly to That Game Company. The only times I've been asked for an email address is when answering their online in-game surveys, which of course you can decline. Payment information. When you order any good or service through the game, including any virtual currency or virtual good, our payment processing service provider will collect your name, phone number, email address, mailing address, billing address, and complete credit card information that enables them to receive your payment. Our payment processing service provider may also retain this information to enable you to purchase additional items through our game without having to re-enter it each time. Please note that purchases from third parties may also be subject to additional policies. Those of you who have made in-app purchases will be familiar with this. What I don't see in there is if any of that information that the third parties collect is shared with that game company. Unless I'm missing something. Information collected by customer support. When you ask for assistance from our customer support team, we will collect and store the contact information you provide, generally your name and email address, information about your gameplay or activity on the games, and your username or TGC account ID number. We will also store the correspondence and any information contained there within, which is pretty much what you would expect, to be honest. Push notifications and local notifications. With your consent, we or our service providers may send push notifications to your mobile device to provide game updates and other relevant messages. You can adjust the types of notifications you receive and when you receive them by editing your notification settings. We or our service providers may also send local notifications to your mobile device to provide game updates and other relevant information. It has to be said, I don't recall within Sky Children of the Light any options about that, but I could be wrong. I would need to pull up the game and go very carefully through all the available options to be sure about it. However, you can certainly on computers and mobile devices change your notification settings. Technical and usage information. When you access our services, we may collect A. certain technical information about your mobile device or computer system, including IP address, mobile device ID, IDFA, Google Advertising ID or other identifiers, and the version of your operating system, and B. usage statistics about your interactions with the games. In certain games, we will create and assign to In certain games, we will create and assign to your device an identifier that is similar to an account number. We may collect the name you have associated with your device, device type, telephone number, country, and any other information you choose to provide, such as username, character name, or email address. We may also request your access to your account. We may also request access your contacts to enable you to invite friends to join you in the games. This information is typically collected through the use of third-party mobile device software development kits. Whoa, that was a little poorly written, which is why I stumbled. I have not, to the best of my knowledge, been requested to access access to my contacts. I assume that's what they mean. We may also request access. I assume that means we may also request access to your contacts. And I do not recall. Oh, this is in case of technical and usage information. I have not dealt with that game company in this regard, so I'm not in a position to comment on it, and I don't recall anecdotes from people who have that are relevant to this paragraph. But some of this information is entirely to be expected. If you they may, yes, this is almost to be expected. Location information. When you use our services, we may collect and store information about your location by converting your IP address into a rough geolocation, or by accessing your mobile device's GPS coordinates or course location if you enable location services on your device. We may use location information to improve and personalize our services for you. If you do not want us to collect location information, you may disable that feature on your mobile device. This is where some people may very well start to get a bit concerned. Now, I know from previous practice that an IP address, while I say cannot, does not readily provide precise location information. For example, if I were to try and use my IP address to find out where I am, it would probably track back to somewhere like London, but I could be wrong. And certainly when I have, for various reasons, tried to track down other IP addresses, the location of which I knew of, it might not even be in the same country, especially in somewhere like Europe. Now that's old information and only applies to Europe. I don't know how it might apply to other parts of the world. Section 3. How we collect your information. We may collect information about you in any one or more of the following ways. Communications features. You may be able to take part in certain activities through our services that give you the opportunity to communicate or share information, not just with that game company, but also with other users of our services. These include, but are not limited to, participating in player forums and message boards, posting public comments to other users' profiles or game boards, sending private messages or invitations to other users, either directly through the games or to their email accounts, sharing user-generated contents or photos if such feature is available, and chat to other users. We may use, record, and store archives of these communications on that game company's servers to protect the safety and well-being of our users and that game company's rights and property in connection with the services. Games may use location tracking, which relies upon a mobile device's GPS coordinates. A user's location may be used to suggest other users with whom they might want to connect, analyze usage trends, or target certain promotions. Which is honestly to be expected. Now, you may not like that they do this, but what that basically means is wherever possible, switch your GPS off on any device that you are playing Sky on if it has a GPS location service. And if you are within a game, be very careful what you share with people, and the same kind of thing on forums and message boards. But that does mean that potentially, if you are on, say, Facebook, on their official Facebook forum, you've basically given them quite a bit of access to personal information. And I am reminded in that part of the end-user license agreements and terms of services where they expect you to adhere to their behavior standards. I don't know if that has ever come back to have consequences for anybody. It is simply worth bearing in mind. I have to confess, reading through some of this is almost enough to tweak my paranoia. Give me a second, I just need some coffee. Cookies and automated information collection. When you access our services, we collect certain technical information in order to A. analyze the usage of our services, B. provide a more personalized experience, and C. manage advertising. We and service providers acting on our behalf may use log files and tracking technologies to collect and analyze certain types of technical information, including cookies, flash cookies, and web beacons. Log files mean certain information about how a person uses our services, including both registered and unregistered users, either a user. Log files may include information such as a user's internet protocol, IP addresses, browser types, browser language, referring and exit pages and URLs, platform type, the number of clicks, domain names, landing pages, pages viewed, and the order of those pages, the amount of time spent on particular pages. game state and the date and time of activity on our site, or the games and other similar information. In some cases, we will associate this information with your TGC account ID number for our internal use. Again, where advertising is involved, that is actually important information for the advertisers. That's just something to bear in mind. You may not like it, but that is nonetheless true. I mean, fortunately, I have not yet seen in any of that game company's games advertising within the game, but this is worth bearing in mind for other games which have in-game advertising, or if you go to a website or forum which might include advertising, all worth bearing in mind. Cookies are small text files that are placed on your device by a web server when you access our services. We may use both session cookies and persistent cookies to identify that you've logged into the service and to tell us how and when you interact with our services. We may also use cookies to monitor aggregate usage and web traffic routing on our services and to customize and improve our services. Unlike persistent cookies, session cookies are deleted when you log off from the services and close your browser. Although most browsers automatically accept cookies, you can change your browser options to stop automatically accepting cookies or to prompt you before accepting cookies. Please note, however, that if you don't accept cookies, you may not be able to access all portions or features of the services. Some third-party service providers that we engage, including third-party advertisers, may also place their own cookies on your device. Note that this privacy policy covers only our use of cookies and does not include use of cookies by such third parties. That is basically pretty much true for anytime you get on the internet with a browser. I'm trying to remember what my cookie policy is set to. I think I have to confirm that I wish to accept cookies. And of course, if you are in the process of accepting cookies, you can in fact specify what type of cookies you receive, at least most of the time. Web beacons, also known as web bugs, pixel tags, or clear GIFs, are tiny graphics with a unique identifier that may be included on our services for several purposes, including to deliver or communicate with cookies, to know if a certain page was visited, or whether an email was opened, to advertise more efficiently by excluding our current users from certain promotional messages, to identifying the source of a new installation, to delivering ads to you on other websites. Unlike cookies which are stored on the device, web beacons are typically embedded invisibly on web pages or in an email. Flash cookies are local shared objects which help us prevent fraud, remember your in-game preferences, and speed up load times. Please note that companies delivering advertisements in the games or on our site may also use cookies or other technologies, and those practices are subject to their own policies. Now, regarding the mail aspect of that, the web beacons, it will depend on the mail software you're using. For example, I use Thunderbird, which quite determinedly refuses to display external content, I believe it's called, which would include such information. Other sources. We may collect or receive information from other sources, including A, other That Game Company users who choose to upload their email contacts, and B, third-party information providers. We do not condition participation in our services on you providing more personal information that is reasonably necessary for that activity. Of course, what is meant by reasonably necessary is not defined. This is strict legalese, and what is reasonable to you may not be the same as what is reasonable to somebody else, and will certainly not be the same as what is reasonable to that game company. This is actually making my mouth quite dry. Excuse me. Trying to reduce the swallowing and salivary noises there. How we use the information we collect. In general, we collect, store, and use your information to provide you with a customized experience. For example, we may use information collected from you in any one or more of the following ways. We use your personal information to fulfill a contract with you and provide you with our services, to comply with our legal obligation, protect your vital interest, or as may be required for the public good. This includes to create accounts and allow the play of the games, to enable user-to-user communications, to provide technical support and respond to user inquiries, to prevent, detect, mitigate, and investigate fraud or potentially illegal activities and enforce our terms of service, to provide other services requested by you as described when we collect your information, to notify users of in-game updates or updates to our terms of service or this privacy policy, and to provide in-game leaderboards and matchmaking, and to promote in-game player achievements. Now, something occurred to me while I was reading that, and I can't remember what it is. Sorry for the long pause there. I'm trying to remember my train of thought that I had to interrupt because I needed to keep reading. Some of this may cause people's paranoia to tweak. This sentence, this segment here, this may be required for the public good. Yeah, that is a statement which can be open to interpretation, because what is in the public good? That is a very open question. However, some of this is absolutely necessary, I think. User-to-user communications would require, for example, IP information, providing technical support. This one is particularly interesting: to prevent, detect, mitigate, and investigate fraud or potentially illegal activities. Yes, absolutely. And given that this video is now going to be marked as not suitable for young people, this could include grooming, for example. When you bear in mind that a lot of young people are playing That Game Company games, this is something they would be particularly aware of. And you honestly can't blame them for wanting to, as far as possible, make it a safe environment for those players, or for anyone, to be honest. We use your personal information to pursue our legitimate interests where your rights and freedoms do not outweigh these interests. We have implemented controls to balance our interests with your rights. This includes to track user retention and aggregated gameplay information to improve the overall user experience for That Game Company's products and services, to solicit input and feedback to improve That Game Company's products and services and customize your user experience, to use general local information to provide you with a location-based services such as matchmaking, search results, and other personalized content. Last time I was wondering whether matchmaking meant something like a dating service. I'm going to assume that that is a more general concept than that. For example, it could mean putting play. In some games, it might mean, for example, putting players of similar skill levels together. I don't know how that would apply to Children of the Light, but that could be, for example, to ensure a diverse operating environment. One thing I have noticed is that I rarely encounter people from England or the United States, but I often encounter, regardless of the time of day, people from Southeast Asia. Whether or not that's as a result of matchmaking in some way, I don't know, but I could certainly see how that would apply. Where was I? Oh, yes. I think I was here, was I not? To contact you with information that we reasonably believe may be relevant to you, and with your consent, we may use your personal information to inform users about new products or promotional offers. Yeah, that's I'm trying to think of a suitable example. Possibly an example might be on Facebook. I first encountered Children of the Light as an advert on my news feed in Facebook, so this could be relevant to that. Although that wouldn't be that game company necessarily, that would be Facebook itself. Or are they calling it Meta these days? If you have provided your email address to us, we may use it to respond to A. Customer support inquiries, and B. Keep you informed of your in-game activity, including comments from friends and notifications about in-game status. With your consent, we may also send promotional email messages, promotional communications, directly or in partnership with parties other than that game company. Each promotional communication will generally offer recipients choices about withdrawing consent so that you no longer receive additional messages. I'm trying to think. I don't believe I've ever received email from that game company about any of this. However, also worth bearing in mind, a lot of this is going to be legal protection. Even if they do not have these features, some of these features they are referring to, if they are going to be continuing to use this privacy policy in other games, then this is a coverall. Now, this is where we get to, so far, it's been primarily that game company and their privacy policy and how they use information. But now we are getting into areas which other people will be more concerned about, which is sharing of your information. We may share your information, in some cases personal information, with third parties in the following circumstances. Third-party service providers. We will provide your information to third-party companies to perform certain services, including but not limited to payment processing, data analysis, email delivering, hosting services, customer service, and to assist us in our marketing efforts. We direct all such third-party services providers to maintain the confidentiality. Sorry, let me do that again. We direct all such third-party service providers to maintain the confidentiality of the information disclosed to them, and to not use your information for any purpose other than to provide services on that game company's behalf. Now, something that immediately occurs to me is this. We direct. That does not necessarily mean that the third-party service providers they are referring to have to follow that game company's direction. I would have thought it would have been more explicitly stated if that was the case. But I could just be being needlessly paranoid. But if I were interpreting this, which I am, would say that it does not necessarily follow that these third-party service providers are necessarily obligated legally to follow that game company's advice. And in fact, previously they did say that the privacy policy did not apply to third-party service providers necessarily. Here are links to the privacy policies for all our third policy providers. Technically, that means you now have to go and look up and read and understand the privacy policies of all of the following. Bearing in mind, according to the end user license agreement and terms of service, you are supposed to read this as well. So technically, you're now supposed to read all of this. But I'm not going to read out all the URLs here. I am just going to name the third-party processors they include. Google Firebase, Fabric, Crashlytics, Datadog, SurveyMonkey, MailChimp, HelpShift, Facebook, Apple, GGWP, and Source Labs. Please note also it says we will provide your information to third-party companies. Not we may, but we will. Advertising of third-party products and services. We do not actively share personal information with third-party advertisers for their direct marketing purposes unless you give us your consent. Except that for some of those third-party services, you will have had to provide personal information, especially if you're making purchases, in-game purchases. But then those in-game purchases are... That is an inevitability. If you want to buy something in the game, it's going to use, say, Steam or Apple or Google or something. So they will have that personal information. What I don't know at this point is whether or not they share that information back with that game company. I would assume not, but it's worth bearing in mind. I'm actually going to start this again because now I've almost forgotten where I was. Advertising of third-party products and services. We do not actively share personal information with third-party advertisers for their direct marketing purposes unless you give us your consent. We may share A. Aggregated information about you and other users collectively but not specifically identifiable to you. B. Anonymous information, and C. Certain technical information, including IP addresses and mobile device IDs, to develop and deliver targeting advertising in the games and on the websites of third parties. We may also allow advertisers to collect these types of information within the games, and they may share it with us. There we go. That's the backward sharing, but I don't know whether that would include things like credit card information. Advertisers may collect this information through the use of tracking technologies like browser cookies and web beacons. We may disclose aggregated and anonymous information to describe the services to prospective partners, advertisers, and other third parties, and for other lawful purposes. We may use aggregate, non-personally identifiable information for our own internal promotion or marketing purposes, and we may share such aggregate, non-personally identifiable information with others for marketing purposes. In certain instances, you may need to opt in or opt out of advertising directly through our partners. Here are links to advertising network database advertising partners: Facebook and Apple. Okay. I'm going to have to assume that this is literally true on the grounds that if their advertising network database and advertising partners is more than these two, they would be legally obliged to include it. So take that for what it's worth. Safety, security, and compliance with law. Your information may be disclosed, A, when we have a good faith belief that we are required to disclose the information in response to legal process, for example, a court order, search warrant, or subpoena. B, to satisfy any applicable laws or regulations. C, where we believe that the games are being used in the commission of a crime, including to report such criminal activity or to exchange information with other companies and organizations for the purposes of fraud protection and credit risk reduction. D, when we have a good faith belief that there is an emergency that poses a threat to the health and or safety of you, another person, or the public generally. And E, in order to protect the rights or property of that game company, including to enforce our terms of service. That is only to be expected. But this does remind me of instances where companies have refused or attempted to refuse to provide such information. I am thinking, what was it? Phone services, for example, internet activity. There are organizations which have in the past tried not to share much of this information with law enforcement or government, and I believe have even gone to court over it. But what they're basically saying is that they are not going to do that. They will comply with the law wherever possible. And in some cases, that would be a good thing. I mentioned grooming earlier. Under those circumstances, I would expect criminal activity to be reported pretty much as soon as it crops up. So in part, this can sound quite intrusive, but also in part, it could genuinely be used to ensure the safety of gamers within, for example, Sky Children of the Light. This is, this is much more open than I think many companies. But on the other hand, I suspect that for gaming companies, this might be quite normal. That is just an opinion. And I would have to go through far more privacy policies than I have at present to check to see if that's the case. Sale or merger. In the event that that game company undergoes a business transition, such as a merger, acquisition by another company, change of control, or sale of all or a portion of its assets, we may transfer all of your information, including personal information, to the successor organization in such transition. I think it's safe to say, by the way, that if they were acquired by another company, then all such information would then belong to that other company. So, for example, let's suppose that game company gets acquired by Microsoft. Just an example. Then Microsoft would automatically have access to whatever information that game company has been collecting on you. Research. We may disclose your information in a format that does not identify you personally to educational institutions and other third parties for research purposes. That is an interesting addition. I don't know whether that's normal. I don't know why that would be put in there. Surely they could have simply said, no, we're not providing this information to educational institutions or anyone for research purposes. Granted, it does say in a format that does not identify you personally, but that's still an interesting inclusion there. I can see the value of it. I would like to know, to be honest, what information they would be providing, which you'll notice they haven't exactly given. Now, this is actually a really, really important bit. Our policies concerning children. Our services are intended for a general audience and are not intended for children. Okay, that's probably legalese and legal covering, because that game company knows that Sky, Children of the Light, has a very large user base amongst young people. So I am going to say that that may be a legally this may be a legally correct statement, but I'd be amazed if the developers are not fully aware that their services, specifically the game at least, is intended for children, and it's intended for adults. But as I recall, their player base is something like 2/3 young people. I don't know what the age group that would be, but if you play the game, you know that there are young people in there, children if you prefer. Let me just start that again. Our services are intended for a general audience and are not intended for children. We do not knowingly collect personal information from users deemed to be children under their respective national laws. If we learn that we have collected personal information of any child, we will take steps to delete such information from our files as soon as possible. We urge parents to instruct their children to never give out their real names, addresses, or phone numbers without permission from their guardians. We recognize a special obligation to protect personal information obtained from young children. Should you wish to have your child's personal information deleted from our records, please contact us at legal@thatgamecompany.com or speak with a customer support representative at thatgamecompany.helpshift.com. We will be happy to remove your child's information as appropriate. That is again an interesting legalistic statement. Again, when they say we do not knowingly collect personal information from users deemed to be children, to what extent can they determine that? I mean, seriously, if you have a Switch user playing the game, how are they going to determine that that person is a child or an adult? And the simple answer is they can't. And that is where that do not knowingly collect. But nonetheless, you can safely assume that, yes, they are collecting information from children or young people, or however you want to label them. And that would include, they have to know. So, legally, they may not knowingly be doing it, but ethically, they must know that they are doing this. How to control your information. Under the EU General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, individuals residing in the EU and other territories that have adopted GDPR compliance or comparable regulation have a right to access your user data, correct the data you have provided to us, have information provided to you in a portable format, request the deletion of the data we have collected, restrict processing, and object to processing or the legal basis on which we rely to process your data. You may send an email to legal@thatgamecompany.com or speak with a customer support representative at thatgamecompany.helpshift.com with your request to exercise any of the rights identified above. Place the reason for your request, e.g., delete my data or correct my data, in the subject line and include your first name, last name, and email address in the body of the email. We will respond to your request within 30 days. Please note that certain records, for example those pertaining to payments or customer service matters, will be retained for legal and accounting purposes. If you have sent or posted content through our services, we may not be able to delete it. Accounts created with That Game Company are considered active until we receive a user request to delete them or deactivate them. You can stop use of your geolocation, for example through check-ins, by visiting your device's settings for the relevant application or the settings page for the relevant game. Please note that requests to restrict processing or delete your data may require the termination of your entire user account if we require the information subject to the deletion request to maintain your user account or otherwise provide gameplay services to you. I wonder if anybody's actually tried this. I'd love to know. It would be kind of interesting to try and get hold of your own user data. I have to admit, I wonder how that would go. Opt-out options. Opting out of promotional communications. You can choose to opt out of receiving additional promotional emails from That Game Company by clicking on the unsubscribe link in any such email or visiting the email preference page. Please note that once we receive your request, it may take an additional period of time for your opt-out to become effective. Your unsubscribe or email preference change will be processed promptly, usually within 10 business days. This, by the way, is something that you will see in a lot of email, and having used such a function in the past, I can say that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Opting out of ad tracking. You can opt out of the collection and use of your information for ad targeting by going to http://www.aboutads.info/choices or http://www.youronlinechoices.eu to limit collection through the site, or by configuring the settings on your mobile device to limit ad tracking through the app. Opting out of other communications. When you install our games on your mobile device, you can choose to receive push notifications. You can turn off push notifications by visiting the options or settings page within the relevant game or device settings. You may also receive local notifications. You can turn off local notifications by visiting the options or settings page within the relevant game or device settings. Note that if you opt out of our promotional communications or other forms of communication, we may still email or communicate with you from time to time if we need to provide you with information or if we need to request information from you with respect to a transaction initiated by you or for other legitimate non-marketing reasons. Excuse me a moment. Yeah, this is basically pretty much standard kind of stuff. Especially if you're using mobile devices, you'll be familiar with the request that certain applications provide you with notifications, and you can switch that off or enable it at your choice. Security of your information. For user accounts registered directly with that game company, profile information is initially only available from the device that was used for registration. It is important that you protect and maintain the security of your account, and that you immediately notify us of any unauthorized use of account. We encrypt the transmission of all information using secure socket layering technology, SSL. While we take certain precautions against possible security breaches of our services, no website or internet transmission is completely secure, and we cannot guarantee that unauthorized access, hacking, data loss, or other breaches will never occur. Although we strive to protect your personal data, we cannot guarantee the security of your data while it is being transmitted through our services. Any transmission is at your own risk. Once we have received your information, we have procedures and security features in place to try to prevent unauthorized access. Which is probably pretty normal. I am not familiar with how different companies go about ensuring information security. It probably varies, but that is a fairly normal thing, and that last section there is basically legal coverage for that game company, although I have no reason to believe that they would not do their best to protect your information. Changes to our privacy policy. If we decide to make material changes to our privacy policy, we will notify you and other users by updating the last updated date above to indicate when those changes will become effective. We may supplement this process by placing notices in the games and on the site. You should periodically check thatgamecompany.com and this privacy page for updates. Continued use of the services after changes are made to the privacy policy would be considered acceptance of the terms, and that if you do not agree with the terms or changes, you should refrain from using the services. Essentially, it is entirely up to you, the user, to check this page on a regular basis. Because you'll note, it states, we will notify you and other users by updating the last updated date on this document. It also says, please note, we may supplement this process by placing notices in the games and on the site. They may. They may not. That's important to realize. Even if they have a policy or procedures to say that they will always do this, they might not for whatever reason. But you'll notice what we're seeing here is an accumulation of implied responsibility on you, the user. They are assuming, even though they know it is not a valid assumption, they are assuming that you've read the end-user license agreement. They're assuming that you've read the terms of service. They're assuming that you've read the privacy agreement, and that they know that the vast majority of people have not. I mean, if you count the amount of time it took me to read the end-user license agreement and terms of service, which was nearly an hour and a half, okay, I was making comments in there. And you also consider that I have been streaming this for an hour. That's a lot you are expected to repeatedly review, just in case something comes up that you don't like. I feel a rant kind of going on at this point, but I may save that for the end. Links to other sites. Our services may contain links to websites and services that are owned or operated by third parties, each a third-party service. Any information that you provide on or to a third-party service or that is collected by a third-party service is provided directly to the owner or operator of the third-party service and is subject to the owner's or operator's privacy policy. We are not responsible for the content, privacy, or security practices and policies of any third-party service. To protect your information, we recommend that you carefully review the privacy policies of all third-party services that you access. Which I think refers back to comments I have made previously. California residents responding to do not track signals. In September 2013, California enacted amendments to the California Online Privacy Protection Act, California Business and Professions Code number 22575-22579, which require operators of websites to disclose how they respond to do not track DNT signals from browsers used by consumers or other mechanisms that provide consumers a choice regarding the collection of personally identifiable information about the consumer's online activities over time and across different web services or online services. While some newer browsers have incorporated do not track features which, when turned on, send a signal or preference to the websites you visit indicating that you do not wish your online activity to be tracked, a DNT protocol that can be implemented across multiple devices and sites has not yet been widely adopted. Currently, our computer system does not support and cannot act on DNT signal headers that we may receive. Accordingly, the choices that we provide you concerning our collection and use of personally identifiable information will continue to operate as described in this policy. Sorry, I'm scratching my head. International transfer. We're almost done. Your personal information may be transferred to and maintained on computers located outside of your state, province, country, or other governmental jurisdiction where the privacy laws may not be as protective as those in your jurisdiction. If you're located outside the United States and choose to provide your personal information to us, we may transfer your personal information to the United States and process it here. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns regarding our privacy policy and/or practices, please contact us by any of the following methods: customer support, legal inquiries, mailing address, or Twitter. Now, the good news is I have kind of forgot the rant I was tempted to go on. But the thing that I have become increasingly aware of in my previous stream on their end-user license agreement in terms of service, and again on their privacy policy, is how is anyone expected to keep track of this and update their knowledge of it? The terms of service and end-user license agreement is an obtuse document, to put it mildly. It is not easy to understand, and I think it contradicts itself in part in this document. I could be wrong, and again, I would have to do so much work and become such a legal expert to properly understand it that it's ridiculous. And if it's ridiculous for me, it's going to be ridiculous for the vast majority of people. I'm just a streamer, YouTuber. I'm not an expert. Neither are most people. So this documentation is while I understand that legally they have to have it, and while I understand the necessity for the legalese in this, I personally think, in part, is deliberate to prevent people from reading and acquiring this information. If it's not an active, deliberate intent, they know people are not going to read or understand this information, let alone keep themselves updated. If you remember, this document was last updated, what was it, about April or May of this year. So how many times has it been updated? Technically, you're supposed to have reread that documentation every single time it got updated. They've specifically stated that you should do this. That the question is this a reasonable expectation? That is something that would depend on the definition of reasonable. What I personally would like to see is an easy to read, easy to understand summary of this, and which, while may not be as legally all-encompassing, would be a heck of a lot easier to understand. And again, I think I've said this before, remember who the prime demographic of Sky Children of the Light is. It is young people. Now, I think I said this last time, technically it would be the responsibility of their parents and guardians to read and understand this information, but what is the likelihood of that? Seriously. And depending on the age of the young person, even if they read this, a lot of them are not going to understand it. Okay, I rant over, which I freely admit may be erroneous or ill-informed, and I am simply responding. One thing I will say is it does not look as though they will collect all your information and then sell it to the highest bidder, which is one accusation I have seen. However, they may very well collect what information and to provide it to approved third parties and give it to them. So the more paranoid kind of have a point. But that's enough. My voice is not feeling up to further. But that is the entirety of the current privacy policy for That Game Company. Hang on, I say hang around for more. I will probably read more that is more game related from the company website at a later date. Unfortunately, there was no reference to the zombie apocalypse or Borg invasion in this, but I hope, if nothing else, you may have found it useful. I will see you all next time, and I hope you all have a good day.